and good night.
This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on important bills relating to Jammu and Kashmir in Parliament. The participants are Professor Ashok Aima, political analyst, and Rajesh Leikh, anchor.
Professor, what are the key provisions of the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Amendment Bill?
I can tell you some broad aspects of this which reflects the intention of this amendment. You see, this is J&K Reservation Amendment Bill 2023, which modifies the J&K Reservation Act of 2004. What does it provide for? Reservation in job, admission to the professional institutions for SC, ST, especially educationally backward areas. Other key feature is the replacement of the phrase weak and underprivileged class with other backward classes, which has broadened its scope to bring in under its umbrella those underprivileged categories or the societies which earlier remained ignored. That's one. Second is that the legislative seats have been increased from 107 to 114, 7 reserved for SC, 9 for ST people, and then vacant seats for POK, POJK have been enhanced from 83 to 90. And besides that, LG has a power to nominate 2 Kashmiri migrants to Legislative Council. But what's more important is that what our Honorable Home Minister said, that Naya Kashmir, which is a popular phrase talked in Kashmir, is in this amendment, the Naya Kashmir is envisaged as to ensure justice to those who have been deprived of their rights for last 70 years. And one I can quickly talk about is the people who had to run away from the POJK after 1947. There were nearly 5 lakh people living in Jammu, displaced, and they were not given the right to vote. That seemed to be a huge aberration in the governance structure and political ideology of the state. I mean, they were earlier empowered, but they haven't been empowered to right to vote because it would otherwise tilt the political equations in this. But what's more important, another good feature of this bill is the socially and educationally backward areas residing in the areas adjoining to the actual line of control. International border have been also brought within the purview of this other backward communities. And that's an empowering act that empowers those who are at the margin, who have never probably given the chance to come in the mainstream participation of the development of the state and of the nation. That's why I think that it's very important that this is the first time the reorganization of J&K, the 5th schedule of the Act, which lists 106 central acts, now are applicable, while as 153 state act will be replaced. So you're bringing in an alignment of the national provisions of the constitutional provision within the ambit of the Union Territory, which I think was always being questioned about earlier, because you had 2 prime ministers, you had 2 flags, you had 2 states. That was done with the intentions, as you know, what they were earlier.
So this Naya Kashmir, which we are talking about now, and the Home Minister also talked about, is very inclusive in nature because of the key provisions of the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Amendment. So what, Professor Aima, are the arguments in favor of the bill, emphasizing the significance of the Naya Kashmir?
It provides for equality and balanced regional development, which is the fundamental to this, because all the sub-regions have their different ethnic groups, different cultural groups, different religious groups, which will now have the same opportunity to access to the provisions of governance as they were. And mostly, I think it's what's more important is the building the trust, which I think for a long time our region was missing. Why? Because you created a kind of a dependency syndrome here. You gave 90%, you gave what you call 10% loan and 90% subsidy. Budget, see the budgetary provision for the last 70 years. And I tell you, Rajesh, if we had prioritized our developmental model from 1950, we should have by this time had about 12,000 to 15,000 megawatt of power, which could have generated electronic industry across the Himalayan belt, right from Udhampur onwards, because it's the best area for such. But we never did that. Instead, what we did, we gave the freebies. That created a lot of dependency syndrome. And that's why you see the present dispensation, which I think is very healthy to happen. And the other day, I saw that Back to Village's fifth program. You are trying to connect the bureaucratic apparatuses, their instruments, with the local institutions at the grassroots level so that you could remove that kind of a gap of perception, of aspiration which people would have despite whatever liberal funding central government would have, that was on the board. But I think rebuilding the trust is, I think, one of the very important aspect of governance. And therefore, their perception management is very good in this. Imagine, I tell you, see, we would have a lot of young boys in the stone pelting in Kashmir, which was a very frequent thing to happen. Why is it not happening for last so many times? Why isn't we having this? It's because you are creating those mechanisms of absorbing the youth, talent, and energy in very productive pursuits of the state by means of entrepreneurship, by business incubation initiatives in the
Diverting the
colleges.
minds towards more developmental things and weaning them towards doing something which is more meaningful in their lives.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying, that we can't see this present reorganization in isolation. You have to look in tandem with the other improvements which are occurring in the governance mechanism. I think it's more than, if I'm correct, more than 150 services have been brought on the e-portal, which has reduced corruption, which has reduced the bureaucratic delays, which has brought in the accountability. That's why I think you must compliment the present dispensation. See that the governance is available. People, irrespective of the region, the distances, that's something what I would think that the voice of displaced people is being brought, encouraged to have its proper representation. This is what I would say.
Yes.
Especially, I think a lot of people have this misperception. You see, if you look at the J&K topographical argument, even in the valley, from Banihal to Baramulla, you have one cultural, lingual setup. But go across Baramulla, go to up to the reaches of Titwal, Tangdar, Uri, Karna, and come to Jammu, the other side, Poonch, Rajouri. They are Pahadis, they are scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, Gujars, Bakarwals, who need to be brought into the mainstream argument in terms of providing them that access and opportunity. So that's what this reorganization is trying to address when you provide a special provision for them, especially ST, SC, and socially and educationally backward classes. I'm not talking all of the political representation. I'm talking of their giving them the empowerment and enabling ecosystem in which they become the part of our national building endeavors as they are.
Okay, Professor, you made very important comment a while back about people depending on the freebies that were earlier given to them. And now that the dependency is being done away with, there is an opportunity for those who want to excel, those who want to be part of the mainstream. They have the opportunity. So how does the bill that has come into force now, provisions being made so that they address the economic or developmental aspects of Jammu and Kashmir?
I think if you look back to Article 370 and 35A, which were kind of a barrier for the inflow of resources, not only the financial resources, but even the human resources to come and participate in the economic and developmental endeavors of the state government, they have been done away with. So that's one thing. That's why I think that the present bill talks about the voice of the displaced people in the legislature. That's on the political front of it. But the more I see it is an inclusive argument where you have brought, for instance, 4 communities of the ST, Gada Brahmins, Koli, Padni tribe, and Pahari ethnic groups. You have brought them into the mainstream argument. It can't be that development cannot be an isolated phenomenon. It has to be all embracing into it. That's why I said that this reorganization is going to not only politically empower those who remain deprived of it, but I think it will have a far-reaching consequences in terms of creating a very vibrant society, participative governance mechanism in the state, and which is very important. With that will augur well. In fact, it's already, I am a very keen watcher of what's happening in POGK. I mean, the voices, they're now coming in, Sarad Kholdo. It's not that they are looking at why would we get the highest rail bridge of the country in the world, that in J&K. Only that priorities are being reset, and I think these priorities need to get aligned with our national priorities.
they're also looking at the development that's happening in J&K.
Yes.
They see the
Yeah.
opportunities that people are seizing.
Absolutely. With their aspirational level, because I may tell you, I was part of what you call part 2 track. I went a couple of times the other side as well. I see the voices being raised now. You're moved from that ideological political rhetoric to a legitimate economic substance into a governance structure. How is that you get the amenities of life here, which are far more accessible here than what they are the other side? I
Okay.
think our economic miracle is itself impacting us, bringing us a kind of a sense of pride at the global level. So then naturally it will impact the people on the other side also. And you see what is happening these days in the other side, where they are not able to even control the voices which are being raised. This long time would now gone where you could talk on the ideological and religious lines alone to create a society.
Professor, I'll also like you to comment on the key amendments introduced in the Jammu and Kashmir Reservation Amendment Bill. Your comments on that.
As I said, these are enabling reservations. Like you said, reservation in admission in jobs, in admission to the professional institutions, and enabling our scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, socially back. You're trying to touch base those strata of population which earlier were never figured into your developmental initiatives. And that's why what our Honorable Home Minister said, that the justice to those deprived of their rights for the last 70 years. So you're trying to bring forth a legislative mechanism which gives voice to the displaced people. And that's where, say, and then earlier the constraining provisos of Article 370 and 35A had isolated J&K from the rest of the country. So you're trying to correct these distortions which were created for the vested interest, a kind of a bureaucratic political power structure, which always created a sense of alienation. That's getting corrected. I'm quite confident. If you see for the last nearly 3 years now, we don't have any hartals anyway. We don't have those stone pelting arguments anymore. Why? Because the government is upfront, open, and trying to provide a provision where, especially the youth energy, youth talent gets into very productive pursuits.
Perhaps, Professor Aima, that's the reason why we see so many Kashmiri youth in our football teams, in our cricket teams. We see them
Absolutely.
in the IAS and IPS and the other administrative
Absolutely.
services.
From a very remote, earlier qualified IAS, you can imagine that can only happen when you provide them that kind of fair and open access to these kind of opportunities. And I can tell you one thing, imagine we had nearly 2 crore visitors visiting last time the valley. If you give it a multiplier of say 1,000, 10,000 rupees imagine what kind of an economic circulation it creates, not
Correct.
only for the house. There are about 8-9 stakeholders in the chain of tourism industry, and everybody benefits from it. And that's where we should be focusing on. Create the economic, empower the youth, their energies productively and positively, and you will see a different union territory of J&K. It would be one of the best in times to come, as I hope.
We will have a Naya Kashmir over there.
You can travel from Jammu to Kashmir in less than 4.5 hours. There's the kind of the network, the roadways, the transport. There's a kind of an optimism, as you rightly said, optimism. A new aspirational argument is being talked about.
Okay.
Nothing like what was being talked about earlier.
Professor Aima, the Naya Kashmir will experience the winds of change because there is light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
You were listening to a discussion on important bills relating to Jammu and Kashmir in Parliament. The participants were Professor Ashok Aima, political analyst, and Rajesh Leikh, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsttalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 928-909-4044.
आकाशवाणी और भारत निर्वाचन आयोग लेकर आए हैं मतदाता जंक्शन सीजन 2। सुनना ना भूलें। 1 दिसंबर से हर शुक्रवार आकाशवाणी दिल्ली के गोल्ड चैनल 100.1 मेगाहर्ट्ज शाम 7:25, रेनबो चैनल 102.6 मेगाहर्ट्ज शाम 7:45 और विविध भारती 106.4 मेगाहर्ट्ज रात 9:15।